Honored chief guest of this morning, Professor Manoj Das, guest of honor, Professor Medical Reddy, Professor 68, or perhaps it was in the first conference of all Odisha Association for English Studies in Revenue College. What do you think of English literature, particularly in the context of an Indian student? Is something that I dream. You must speak in this language, you must write in this language, but chiefly as a natural to a man or a student. That's why you should take language, English language, for themselves. I'm very happy and I No.
President Sir, Professor Khan, my dear Vijay Kumar, renowned scholars on the Presidium, and dear scholars and friends. Well, I am overwhelmed by the kind words spoken about me. I wish how much I deserved them. I do not, because I do not belong to a class of scholars, really speaking. I have been a seeker in literature and a creative writer of sorts, nothing more than that. But I would like to frankly put before you my feelings on the subject. First of all, I congratulate Vijay Kumar for having chosen this topic. There are always, of course, there are individual books written on these characters, several of them. There are critical accounts about works in which they figure, but an exclusive seminar on these characters and their significance, I believe, is a rare event, and I congratulate you for having participated in that event. By the way, about feminism, the term used that brought to my mind, and I must remind you, a fact, undeniable fact, that the world's first known feminist was an Indian character. You know, when mankind was created, the father of mankind is King Daksha, and he had 100 daughters. In those days, human beings were not there. The daughters were born out of his spiritual tapasya, not sons, daughters, and there were gods to whom they were married, demigods and gods. The youngest daughter was Sati, and he had chosen to marry Shiva, Lord Shiva. But the father did not give his consent to this proposal because Shiva, according to him, was somebody like a hippie who sits on the mountain and wears a tiger skin for his cloth, garment, a snake for his garland, and a dumbbell for his musical instrument, and no home, no house, no palace at all. How can his beloved youngest daughter marry him? To cut short the story, Sati was insistent, and she did marry Shiva, and the father told her, never show your face to me. Get out. She didn't mind. Short time later, King Daksha organized a huge yajna. You know, yajna has two meanings. One is, it is the aspiration for something higher, which goes up like a flame. And the physical corollary is the fire light, the yajna, the jaga, the flames which go up. Now, the little divine mischief maker Narada suddenly reached. She was about and looked at Sati and said, Devi, goddess, how are you here? Don't you know that your old daughter, your sisters and brothers-in-law are all there at your father's place? No, I didn't know. That's a great something. And how is it that you are not there? I will be there. I will get ready very soon. Come here. She was said, no, my dear, you cannot go. Uninvited, you should not go anywhere. A sentence which Sati uttered at the moment became the unwritten law of Indian sociology for thousands of years. And she said, at no point of time, in day or at night, a daughter's entry to her parents' house can be forbidden. It is always open. And she did go. And what happened thereafter, of course, you know, I won't go into the details. But first, she defied her father for sake of her love. Second, she defied her husband for sake of a great ideal that a daughter's entry to the father's house can never be forbidden. So, in mythology, which precedes history by thousands of years, this is the first example of a undiluted, pure feminist. Coming to the subject, well, Cleopatra, Sita, Kunti was missing from the communication which I had received. Savitri and Draupadi, beautiful choice. Well, Helen and Cleopatra. I'm not going to much about Cleopatra because she's a historical character. Helen is a myth. Now, like Joan of Arc, for example, imagine of a 17-year village girl, illiterate, under British touch. Imagine from her sylvan, rustic background, coming to the hills of France, crowning the Dauphin, the crown prince, who was feeling helpless almost, heading the French army and driving away British from France. How can you imagine such a character? How can you? George Barnes was trying to do a psychological interpretation through his famous play, Joan of Arc. It is absurd. It is something. It is a pure, great power, a manifestation which could alone do that. But Helen is a mythical character. Historically, like Joan of Arc, Cleopatra is a mythical character, historical character, but while actions of Joan of Arc or the mythical Helen externally change the course of history, Cleopatra's action has a subtler impact, not very external, but also it has an impact on history. But there is a detailed subject, I won't go into that. Coming to Helen, you know, there was a great scholar before India was divided in Dhaka University. I forget his name, Mr. Syed Muzaffar or something. I'm sorry, don't take this name as authentic. He had made a beautiful thesis. He had proved that Homer was influenced by Ramayana. Externally, the stories outlines are same, you understand. Helen was kidnapped by the Trojan prince Paris. Her husband, Helen's husband Menelaus, united all the Greek kings because Greece was at that time divided into several small kingdoms. United them and then led them against Troy. Troy was devastated after a bloody war continuing for many years, and Helen was rescued. It is no longer called a myth because late 19th century and early 20th century excavations of Troy has decidedly proved that there was a war, there was a big war there about, say, 3000, about 2000 BC or something like that. I can't be exact about the time. Saying Sita is kidnapped by, Helen was enticed by Paris. Sita is kidnapped by Ravana. But Rama, with the cooperation of the army of Sugriva, launches a great martial expedition and rescues Sita from the clutches of Ravana. But the similarity ends here. Helen is a passive character. She is under the influence of some worldly power. Gives herself is led by Paris. Sita is a dynamic character. Vijay was referring to the general impression about this Sita and Savitri. Some years ago, I received from a Swedish university a research work where very clearly, for review, clearly it is stated that Indian womanhood remained timid, self-effacing, and worked like a serf because of the influence of the character of Sita, was so docile, was so devoid of any personality. I'm not quoting the exact words, but this is the sense. I was horrified. Any reader of the Ramayana, if one reads the Ramayana, would feel an entirely different idea of Sita. In fact, Dr. K.R. Srinivasa Iyengar has a work called Sitayana, not Ramayana. According to him, the real title of the epic should be Sitayana. She is the prime mover. Sita herself decided to accompany Rama against the pleadings of all the superiors, seniors in the palace. You should not, my child, go with you, play into the forest. She does defy everybody and follow Rama. In the forest, look at her prudence. When Rama is there, I should not be too long, but still this is coming so powerfully because Sita's character cannot otherwise be really impressed upon you. You see, once delegation of rishis come to meet Rama when he is in Dandakaranya already, as a guest of one of the rishis, and they describe to him the torment and torture they're experiencing the hands of the demons, Rakshasas, Asuras, etc. And Rama says, I am here. He looks at his bow and quiver of arrows. I am here with these weapons to protect you and to put an end to the menace that is the tribe of Rakshasas and Asuras. A second delegation comes. Rama says the same thing. Third delegation comes. Rama says the same thing. After they depart, Sita says, Aryaputra, I hope you are not under the spell of your weapons. You are so eager to use them. And she beautifully tells a story. I am sorry, these words she did not say fast. She says simply, Aryaputra, I would like to tell you a story. Yes, once upon a time there was a young yogi, and gods were afraid of his yogic power, or some demigods. But instead of making some Apsara dance before him, they resorted to a novel technique of, depriving of his benefits of yoga. What they did? Simply they put a glittering sword in front of him. During the intervals between two spells of his meditation, the young rishi saw the glittering sword lying before him. He touched it. He was happy. Second time he unsheathed the sword. Third time he applied it on a plant. The way the plant was sliced impressed him very much. Fourth time he applied it on a deer, and the deer was killed. More thrill. Fifth time, he applied it on a human being. The spell of the sword had possessed him. Many years later, Bertrand Russell wrote one of his essays, the way in which the nations are gathering destructive weapons, namely nuclear weapons, where time may come, the authorities of the countries will be under the spell of the weapons themselves, and they would feel restless to use them, unless they use them for the use of storing them. For a long time I have stored billions and billions of dollars, so I must use them. See the psychological similarity between Bertrand Russell's observation and Sita's observation. And Sita says, my Lord, I hope you are not under the spell of your weapons. You are promising the rishis again and again that you will destroy the Rakshasas. All Rakshasas may not be bad. Character of Sita. And it is she who asks Rama to go after the golden deer. It is not Rama who chooses it. When Lakshmana is determined not to leave Sita alone because Maricha had given a deceptive cry, "Oh Lakshmana, come to my rescue," it is Sita who compels him to go. Well, when in the palace of Ravana, Hanuman goes and meets her and says, "Mother, come sit on my back. I will carry you safe to your husband." What is Sita's answer? Ravana has brought me as a thief. If you on my behalf of my husband can be back as a thief, what's the difference between Rama and Ravana? Ravana must be vanquished. He must be avenged upon. And only then Rama deserves to win my hands again, to take me back again. See the character of Sita and what an impression people have about Sita. Sita is rescued. And that's a very subtle point. Agni Parisya. Rama identified with the human beings. You see, the avatar also becomes a part of the humanity. Identify with the human beings. Such things allowed. Well, all these days you have been in the confinement of your Osro's fortress. I don't know how the residents of Ajodhya will receive you as the queen of Ajodhya. Oh, it is Sita who orders for the Agni Pariksha. She asks Lakshmana, obliges Lakshmana to prepare. She enters the flames. Pure as she was like flames could not burn her. She was brought back. Of course, the Bhagavatam gives a beautiful explanation that when Sita was stolen by Ravana, it was a false Sita, a Maya Sita. The real Sita remained with the god of fire. And when this time Sita came out, it was the real Sita, and the other Sita was consumed by the fire. Of course, another person says that other Sita was not consumed by fire, she was born afterwards in Draupadi. This is a different thing. Now, so you see, this is the character of Sita. And Uttarakhanda, the postscript chapter of Ramayana, is not a work of Valmiki. Valmiki's epic ends with the coronation of Rama. Everything ends happily there. But whoever is the poet who composed Uttarakhanda, if you read, you see, I am not a Sanskrit scholar, I can read, but still Ramayana you can all understand. Ramayana Sanskrit is so simple, beautiful, lyrical, you can all understand. But you can also see the difference between the epic's major part, style, and the style of Uttarakhanda. It's a different style. It's written by somebody else. But whoever he is, there isn't a greater magnificent satire on human nature, the unfortunate riffraff of humanity, than Uttarakhanda. Sita was once symbolically Satya, discovered by Janaka, the father consciousness. Janaka means father, out of Mother Earth. She was given to no less a person than an avatar like Rama. Hostile forces are so powerful, they could kidnap her even from the avatar's custody. With a great struggle, vehemently fought struggle, she was rescued. But humanity did not deserve her. After all these people suspect her character, somebody made an observation about her character. She was with a demon king, who knows? And the same Sita, when exiled and when ultimately brought back to satisfy the riffraff, what a comment. She is requested to appear again in Agni Pariksha before everybody. The first Agni Pariksha was done by Sita herself out of her own free will. Here she is expected to entertain the public for popular curiosity to be satisfied. Why should she, the daughter of the earth, the truth of the earth, decide to go back to the earth? Mankind did not deserve her. What is a character, a great character? Now, you see, Homer lived 700 BC. Homer lived 700 BC. And it is believed that Ramayana story was first found in Jatakas. I am not sure because Jataka stories are all retold versions of folklore which prevailed earlier, legends which prevailed earlier. They are not Buddha only had narrated a few Jataka stories, others are added by Buddhist disciples, Buddha's disciples. So, the Ramayana story, I am absolutely sure, must have preceded by a few hundred years the birth of Jatakas. Unfortunately, North Indian, you see, our ancestors were not very capable of preserving the manuscripts in a proper way. And temples were the repositories of manuscripts, and temples are destroyed again and again. The manuscripts were burnt down. So, that is the limitation of Indian scholarship. We do not have many old documents to prove the antiquity of our great literary works, their origin. Anyway, coming to the next character, that is, say, Draupadi, Mahabharata. Sometimes I feel so disappointed. I remember when there is Mahabharata was being serialized on television, very popular serial. Certain things scandalized me. Certain things, for example, Draupadi appearing on the balcony when Duryodhana is feeling humiliated because he stepped into what he thought to be a beautiful floor, but which proved to be water. And Draupadi's comment, Andha ka ladka andha, blind man's son blind. You believe Draupadi could have said that? Draupadi, who was being dragged into the Kaurava court afterwards, at a little interval when Dushasana is a bit tired, she looks at the elders and says, I am sorry, when I came here, I could not do namaste to you, I could not show my respect to you. Such is the character of Draupadi. She would use these words. If you read Mahabharata carefully, original Mahabharata, you will see that to get the permission from Dhritarashtra to challenge the Pandavas again to a certain game, first time Duryodhana says that I was there but I was not properly entertained in Indraprastha. Second time he adds something more. Dhritarashtra is still not willing to permit him to again challenge the Pandavas. Third time he adds that, you see, to provoke the old man that you are blind, and she tried to humiliate you by saying that I am the blind man's son. Only then Dhritarashtra obliges him. Had this been a fact, first time Duryodhana would have said. These subtle things in between the lines, we have to read. The great epic poets believed that the readers would be equally sensible or partly sensible. So, when I see again that modern Indian writers thinking they should be very progressive, you see the master of psychology, they try to project Draupadi's character in the light of their own emotions, their own deficiencies. She must have developed weakness for their weakness for them. They forget the fact that Draupadi is not a human being. She is not an evolutionary being like all of us. She is a direct appearance. Kanya Samadhyama, a young lady who has come, her father wanted a boy to fight his enemy. But because the enemy represented hostile forces and the divinity knew that a boy, a young man would not be sufficient to kill them, a Shakti Draupadi sent along with the boy. The father did not pray for Draupadi. She came as a bonus, as a gift, extra gift. She is not an evolutionary human being. She cannot be judged by human standards. Well, it is she who is responsible for the ultimate destruction of the hostile forces. Again and again, the Pandavas try to inspire compassion in the hearts of the Kauravas. They are prepared for a compromise. Only one person who is not prepared for a compromise is Draupadi. And like Sita, the prime character in Ramayana, it is Draupadi who is the prime character in the whole Mahabharata. It could be called a Draupadi Kavya, it would be absent. So, it is Draupadi, when Krishna goes as an ambassador to negotiate for peace, and he ultimately comes to Draupadi and says, what is your advice? By that time, all the other senior Pandavas and Pandavas themselves, they had given him advice, try for peace. She says, how does Arjuna and Bhima forgive that I was humiliated as no other woman ever in known history had been humiliated before a whole court. Peace for them. You will allow these forces to remain alive and active. What the purpose? You are being devotees of truth, votaries of truth. Krishna, you are supposed to be the incarnation of truth. How do you say like this? And no compromise thereafter. Draupadi lest she should forget the humiliation. The poet or the historian, Gaso, you can call him a poet or you can historian poet, you can say, because undoubtedly they are helping a Mahabharata war. So, you see, in no other country, the epics, episodes of the epics, for thousands of years are identified with the process of the subcontinent as the episodes of Ramayana and Mahabharata. Ajanta is there, everything is there. Indraprastha, Hastinapura, Delhi, they are there. All for thousands of years, unbroken legends justify this with the epic events with these places. Now, anyway, so, yes, what did I say? Yes. In the Varavasa, while they were in the reside in the forest, lest Draupadi should also forgive. She is humiliated again and again. Jayadratha comes when Pandavas are not there. And he tries to drag her away with false temptations and all that. Luckily, the Pandavas arrive and save her. Kichako, last phase of the Mahabharata, Kichako tries to humiliate her again, he is killed by her. So lest she should also become a little weak or forgetful, Providence sees to it that her humiliation, the series of humiliations, does not come to an end easily. That is the character of truth. I am so surprised, some years ago, I think published in the late 60s or early 70s, a very popular edition of the English edition of Mahabharata, which was believed to be, an authentic version of Mahabharata, sold very well by a professor, edited by a professor from Calcutta. I did not name him, you can understand he has promoted many ideas by his workshop and all that. Very popular. Indian Express in those days was quite powerful and it asked me to review it properly. Early 70s. I read the book. I was very mind. Actually, all mistakes. Very clearly he says in the introduction that except Arjuna, all other Pandavas had no wife outside Draupadi. It is not a fact. All the Pandavas are married outside Draupadi. Also had married. But what shocked me, when Draupadi is being humiliated in the court of Kauravas, Krishna comes to his aid. You know that, isn't it? You can visualize the scene. Why did Krishna come to her aid? The reason is, first of all, because Krishna is a relative, Draupadi is a relative of Krishna. As if a relative is in distress, I may go down of clothes, I can supply a few clothes to her. Relative. Secondly, his name is Krishna, her name is Krishna. Thirdly, when once Krishna had been slightly wounded, I am using that word within quote. Savitri Draupadi tore her costly sari and bandaged his finger. So he was indebted to her. That is why he came to her aid. The philosophy of when everything fails in individual, when there is no human help, there is nothing, you can't rely even on the most trusted guardians of yours, seniors of yours. Imagine the court of Kaurava when he is being humiliated. Even Karna, he too is inspiring Dushasana, go on, humiliate her. Karna, who has many, sympathizers, and one scene exposes him totally. At that time, when everything fails you, the only power who does not fail is the divine help when you helplessly and completely surrender to the divine and call for his help. A situation, a truth which has sustained the miserable mankind for thousands of years. Remember the helpless situation of Draupadi and the providential help that comes to her when she has a lot over everything else. This great truth is simply ignored. And because he had bandaged his finger, because he was a relative, because the names were similar. I wrote all these things, of course. The professor Zalan started when after the close he came to Pondicherry, he met me. One late night he was traveling. Once after a night he had written very severe criticism on Sri Aurobindo's poetry. That day while working with me, he told me how little I understood, I said, that's all right, fine, thank you. So, anyway, everybody calls, everyone grows also. Now, I don't know, because Kunti was not in my, in the notification given to me, but one simple situation regarding Kunti gives a wisdom, gives a profundity of psychological knowledge which is incomparable. After the battle of Kurukshetra is over, Krishna is taking leave of all the friends, going back to Dwaraka. Each one he asks, can I help you in any way? Can I give you something? And each one has something to ask. When he goes to Kunti, what will Kunti ask for? Many of you know, I believe. Kunti says, Krishna, bless me that every day in my life I will face a crisis. My God, what a boon to ask for. We are all eager to come out of crisis. If any guru indeed, we need the boon of getting over a crisis. But bless me that I will face a crisis every day. Because when he asked why, he said, unless I face a crisis, there is a possibility of forgetting Krishna. It is only when I am in a crisis that I will ask for his help. Now remember, life is short. Crises come and go, but my relation with the Lord is the only thing. And if crisis enables me to retain that relationship, which is more powerful? When you ask, say Draupadi was asked by the Pandava women after the war was over. Draupadi said, sometimes it becomes difficult for us to control one husband. You have 5 husbands. How do you keep under control? A simple, innocent answer is because I have no lust in me. I have no desire. She is an instrument of divine. 5 Pandavas are 5 emanations of Indra. She alone can keep them united. So for the physical part is concerned, she has hardly identified herself with that. Wonderful characters, glimpses of characters in Mahabharata and Ramayana, which put our effort to analyze them with our knowledge of Freudian psychology. We have to say it is simply absurd, if we can say. Now, the last character coming to Savitri, actually Savitri, you must think, comes before Draupadi, because Savitri is a character in Mahabharata. No. Savitri is a character which appears in Mahabharata as mentioned by Yudhishthira. But he says when it's the Vanaparva, when Markandeya, the sage Markandeya, comes on a courtesy call to Yudhishthira, and Yudhishthira says, how much Draupadi has suffered. I wonder if there was another woman like her, comparable to her. Quietly Markandeya says, yes, there was another. And long ago, that is when Mahabharata time, it is long ago, the princess of Madra is modern Afghanistan. The princess of Madra, Savitri, was a luminous character, Kanya Tejaswini. So, and he gives the story of Savitri. But as Sri Aurobindo explains, the Vedic cycle, the Savitri legend is something so much symbolic and so much powerful, you see. I mean, there are many aspects of Savitri's character and her symbolism, but only one thing I will refer to here. For ages, we are trying to, my subject, I have given the title to my talk, Heroines as Liberators. We are trying to achieve liberation from our ignorance. We are trying to achieve liberation from suffering and death. Now, when we come to this line of adventure, human adventure to the edges against death, it begins in the most primitive time, primeval time. Primitive is what the different connotations again. Primeval time, when there are no human beings, gods and demons are there, very powerful tribes, but death at that time was a reality. So they must find out the secret of immortality. And that secret lies in a nectar which remains embedded in the oceans. Of course, ocean there symbolizes consciousness, but I won't go into symbolic interpretation of each stage. Devas and asuras are trying to discover nectar. Nectar was found, but the asuras were deprived of it because they represented all the arrogance and ego which are not conducive for human progress. So gods got the nectar. But human beings came. Long after that, death, as Sri Aurobindo said in Life Divine, 5 aspirations of mankind, from the beginning till today. Conscious man is trying to resolve the problems of God, light means knowledge, freedom, bliss and immortality. Now this search for immortality, the quest for immortality which began with Samudra Manthana, we see there are many episodes, but first let me come into, say there was a time when, Nachiketa. You know in the Upanishad Nachiketa's story. Nachiketa's father is performing a yajna. You see, again, when studying Upanishad, we have to have a certain attitude, a certain kind of consciousness which you have lost today. But unless you master that, difficult to decipher the real bhaktavya, what really they want to say. Now, on the surface, you will see that the sage is performing a yajna, when he is giving away whatever he had, including a very weak and emaciated cow. It is not that he was trying to deceive the recipient with the emaciated cow. The fact is, whatever he had, he was giving away. Because the purpose of the tzedakah is to get freedom from attachment. So he should not remain attached to anything. So he was giving it. Now, his son Nachiketa believes, Upanishad does not say it. We have to understand that the father's greatest object of attachment is myself. Unless he gets rid of that attachment, the yajna will not be successful. He goes to his father and says, Father, I must remind you, whom do you give me? Father doesn't say, because that attachment is still powerful. Can't sacrifice his son. Second time he says, third time he says, the mother says, Prajyama. Everyone will feel like the father got angry and go to hell, he said, die, he says. No. He commissions him to do a research on the mystery of death. Yama, the god of death, symbolizes the mystery of death. It is said that Nachiketa proceeds to the Yama's abode, waits for 3 days and 3 nights because he is not there, God is not there. He comes back that 3 days and 3 nights, he was absorbed in his meditation, trying to seek the Godhead of Yama. And 3 days and 3 nights, Yama comes back. In lieu of his, you see, struggle for 3 days and 3 nights to keep himself awake and to wait for him, he offers him 3 wounds. I won't go to first 2 wounds, which are very normal. Let my father get peace because he must be deprived of me. Without me, he must be feeling unhappy and etc. etc. Third wound, keep with the mystery of what happens after death. Yama says, my child, that is not your cup of tea. You asking for youth forever, great wealth, power, kingdom, mastery over empire, nothing doing. You have promised to give me 3 wounds. My third wound should be my knowledge of the mystery of death. Ultimately, it has revealed him death is an illusion. Once you know your soul, you know that there is nothing as a death, because soul is important. First time we come to know about the mystery of the soul, that our personality is not composed of simply our thinking faculty, our physical body, our emotional aspect of our personality, but something more than that, which holds all these things, and that is soul. Again, that is a subject I hope I am not delaying another few minutes. And so, that is Nachiketa. Then, knowledge of soul has come. Third, we see again, Markandeya, the son of great Brikanda, says Brikanda was childless. And he wants a child. Lord Shiva tells him, choose. Either you get a child who will go 12 years, best of the 12 years of, consider 12 years of lifespan, but will be a great scholar, a Pratyabha, Ananya Pratyabha. Or you can get a son who will be a fool but 100 years. Says asked for the first alternative, let me have a son who will be genius and 12 years. It is all right, but the moment the 11th year was completed by his son Markandeya, the father and mother started shedding tears. You see, and then Markandeya was by that time a proved genius. He was taking classes of Vedas with rishis. And so, one day Markandeya asked his father, what is the reason for your drawing such a long face, imprinted with melancholy? And he confessed to him, my child, after one never mind. 12th year is coming. Markandeya goes to a solitude, sits in meditation, totally identifies himself with Shiva, the other name, meaning of which is an eternity. The individual Markandeya ceases to exist. What is there is eternity, is one with eternity. The appointed time for death comes, And the messengers of the god of death arrived there. You see the calendar pictures, Markandeya, god of death, the Jamadutas are trying to take him away, and Shiva is killing them with his trident. These are all popular versions of the truth. The truth is there. The messengers of death came. They could not find Markandeya because individual Markandeya had ceased to exist. He had become a part of eternity. The time passed, destiny changed. They went back. When Markandeya came back to his mortal senses, 7 rishis were passing by. Markandeya bows down to each one of them, and each one of them says, "Live long," and Markandeya was present with them very, very long life. It is this Markandeya who told the story of Savitri to our his Yudhishthira. Now, you see, so till then, it is a conquest of death in a certain way. Then comes the famous story of Ruru and Pramodvara in Upanishads again. That's a magnificent, small, long poem, small epic you can say, by Sri Aurobindo called Love and Death, which depicts the story. But read it, it is beautiful. He changes the name Pramodvara to Priyambada there, for sake of rhyming in it. Now, Ruru and Pramodvara are forest dwellers, young boy and young girl, and they are in love with each other. You see, the freedom for love is not a modern phenomenon. It was there since Vedic times. And so, they were engaged. They would marry. One early morning, Ruru has gone into the forest to prepare a bouquet of flowers for Pramodvara. Pramodvara is pretending to be angry with him. Why did he go in dusk into interiors of forest? And Ruru is coming. Pramodvara is waiting to rebuke him. Suddenly Ruru observes something happens. Pramodvara is taken aback and falls down, collapses. Ruru comes there and sees a serpent like a string of lightning running away. It has bitten Pramodvara and sees. Looking at Ruru, as if she is saying, "Why did this happen to me? I did not wish to die. Why did this happen?" Silent Pramodvara takes her body up. At that time, in that anguished moment, first time we see, Upanishad introduces the God of love. We see the relations between death and love. It is not life and death which are juxtaposed. Life is simply, death is absence of life only. The enemy of death is love, or vice versa. The enemy of love is death. When somebody dies, you are upset about the degree of your love for the person. The God of love appears, and he gives a flower which was a passport for Ruru to enter the nether worlds where freshly dead souls are still there. Ruru enters the nether world, makes a bargain, I am being very brief, makes a bargain with the god of death. Half of my life I surrender to Pramodvara, let her come back to life. So the half of remaining part of Ruru, those days they lived long of course, half of the remaining part of Ruru's life, Pramodvara comes back and they live thereafter. But it is still a bargain, a compromise, not a conquest. Hats off to Indian literature and hats off to Indian womanhood who have retained the legend of Savitri through their ritual, as Vijay Kumar was referring to the womanhood of India, observing Savitri Amavasya, Savitri festivity, and etc. etc. What a wonderful tradition, what a living tradition. You see, Homer's Iliad, Helen, Cleopatra, or they are discussed only in such seminars. But all these characters are living aspects of Indian life. Every other Indian is named after character for our all the festivities are associated with these great epics. And Ramayana never fades away. And so anyway, so here you see Savitri. Sri Aurobindo resurrect the legend. Sri Aurobindo's vision is, as you know, it is easy to appreciate Sri Aurobindo's vision only if we remember what are we seeking in our life through all our struggles, aspirations, hopes. What are we seeking in our life? Sum total of our seeking is we are imperfect, we are seeking for perfection. I get happiness, imperfect happiness. I get satisfaction, imperfect satisfaction. Sri Aurobindo says all these imperfections are felt because perfection is there. An eternal perfection is molding us into its own image. A close from one of the sentences of Sri Aurobindo. There is an eternal perfection. Future remolds the present, not past. So because the eternal perfection is there, we are growing into it, and man will one day grow into it. And death, which is the sum total of imperfection, death will be erased from the destiny of mankind. Just as Savitri, the princess of Bhadra, the daughter-in-law of the king of Sallu, erased death from the destiny of Vasatyavan. One day the Gangavadaran of love, the descent of that mighty flow of love, all human destiny. It has been deserving humanity, no doubt. We have to wait for it. How many generations? I believe in rebirth. We have to revert again and again. So one day, it is this magic class of love that will erase death from the destiny of humanity. Thousands of years old legend springs back to life in that mighty hand of the greatest epic poet, Sri Aurobindo, in Savitri Mahakanto. So you see the characters, how dynamic, and there are two ways of looking at these characters. Another 5 minutes? Yes, thank you. Another 5 minutes. So, two ways of looking at these characters. One is the way of our ignorance and our limitations. The other is the way of enlightenment. Look at the character of Sita, how through the ages, great writers have found new meaning in that. Kamban's Tamil, great poet Kamban, his Ramayana, when Ravana comes to kidnap Sita, Sita is so pure, he can't touch her. So he uproots a chunk of earth on which Sita stands and takes it away. A new revelation of the greatness of Sita. Now, Tulsidas, Ramayana, why did Rama take such a long time to kill Ravana? Can we imagine the wonderful spiritual insight? He says because till the last moment, inside Ravana's heart, Sita dwelt. He was loving Sita. So how can Rama kill Ravana? As long as Sita is alive inside his heart. I can't describe the profundity of this mighty poetic feeling. But when Ravana is desperate and forgets everything, he is killed. So these are not simply characters, fiction characters lost to us, matters of past, but they are still living and dynamic forces. I will conclude. I don't know, I should not. Yes, to a lighter pen. I bring you down to a completely lighter pen. I believe in 1960 something happened in Bombay, Mumbai. At that time it was Bombay. It approached happened as a joke, but it was a fact I am told. There was a young entrepreneur, industrialist. When he comes back home, he collects his little son from the school. And he fondles him, he spends an hour with him, 2 hours with him. And he asks, what did you learn today in the school? And his child will say, one day the mother asked, what did you learn today? Oh, today, it was a bit blue. Didi, our sister, our teacher, told us a story called Ramayana. Tell me the story. Oh no, father, you would be interested. No, tell me the story. I tell you, it would be interesting. No, tell me the story, please. Oh, you see, hero and heroine, Ram and Sita went to forest for picnic, and the villain came, kidnapped Sita, Ramasaman, his lieutenants and all that, there was some exchange of missiles, and then this is what your teacher told you was Ramayana. Then the son smiled and says, Father, what the teacher told me is very beautiful, wonderful, but you won't believe that. So this father repeated the story for father, so father repeated it because but the story goes strong in the mind of the son. That is called, what is it? The spark of genius, spark of inspiration, which gave eternal life to these characters. Friends, thank you very much. Time is a limitation. I must tell you many thanks, Vijay Babu, Professor Knapp, for calling me. My younger brother, but my relative, Professor Roy, and always watching my activities and my writings, as I know. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay.
May I request Mr. Umesh Shankar Nayak to dispose of voting.
Luminous dais, most revered, and my friends in the audience. Just you were glued to the hypnotic wisdom. I think I have come to break this silence, hypnotic silence. I am sorry for it. Professor Das really kept our physical ambience in suspense, because he was taking us to the world of perfection, and it is really engaging and absorbing. We felt as if we were out of our mortal frame. We went for the time being to a spiritual height, a spiritual upliftment. We can't give our thanks to him because he is always there. He deserves our thanks. Like Kunti, we can say that, oh God, give us crisis so that I remember you. So, on behalf of the association, we can say, oh Professor Das, give us Amrit Phalas, legions of Amrit Phalas, so that we can remember you perpetually, perpetually. With these words, on behalf of the association, we thank you very much. We thank all the professors, Palada, Venkateswar, and Dikera, and most our beloved brother, Professor Das, and our president. Thank you all. Thank you once again.